What's the biggest they finally got what they deserved moment you've witnessed? Story 1. I used to sit 3 cubes from Payroll Maria, the kind of woman who kept birthday cards in her desk, color-coded tabs for everything, and a Tupperware of almonds she'd offer you when you looked defeated. Our startup had just announced a temporary pay cut to save cash. The CFO, Lance, said our burn rate demanded sacrifice. Maria stopped offering almonds that day and started printing things, quietly. 2 weeks later, at an all-hands in the cafeteria, Lance strutted in with a deck full of runway charts and buzzwords. He thanked us for leaning in while he steered the ship. Then Maria stood up. No microphone, just a folder. "I have a question," she said, voice shaking but steady. She walked to the front like a substitute teacher who's done this before. She laid out 3 pay stubs, hers, a junior engineer's, and Lance's. She circled a line, retention adjustment. It showed up every other Friday for exactly 5 people, Lance and his buddies in exec row, right after the pay cut memo. While the rest of us took 15%, they quietly added back 20% as retention. Lance smirked. "That's a misinterpretation of—" Maria pulled out a thumb drive. "I figured you'd say that, so I exported the payroll journal before my access got revoked." IT tried to wave her off, but the CEO, who'd been glancing at his phone all meeting, told them to plug it in. On the projector, a tidy spreadsheet with dates, approvals, and initials. The retention line began the day after the pay cut memo and ended the morning Maria's access was yanked. The approval field? L. Trask. He pivoted to legalities. "These are confidential." Someone in facilities laughed. "Dude, it's literally our money." The room went very still. The CEO finally looked up and asked Maria, "Are these accurate?" She nodded. "I printed my termination notice too. It says for cause, data misuse, dated yesterday. I haven't been terminated." Legal started whispering. The CEO excused himself with Lance. Security followed. 10 minutes later, Lance was escorted back in without his badge. You could hear a pin drop. The CEO announced immediate reinstatement of everyone's pay, back pay with interest, and an external audit. We clapped. Awkward, stunned, grateful. Maria cried and apologized for crying. 2 months later, a push notification hit my phone on a Tuesday. CFO charged with wire fraud. The article photo showed Lance in a suit, looking smaller than our break room fern. The best part? The audit recovered the retention funds plus penalties, enough to save a dozen planned layoffs. Maria returned to her desk with a brand new jar of almonds. On top of it sat a gold nameplate engraved by facilities. In case of buzzwords, open spreadsheet.
Story 2. I'm the new wife, which is code in my town for homewrecker, though the timeline says otherwise. My husband, Eric, left his marriage after years of counseling and sleeping on the couch. His ex, Tessa, runs on weaponized Facebook posts, mom quotes, and vague accusations that always land at my feet. Through it all, Eric's daughter, Abby, 14 and polite to a fault, got shuttled between homes like fragile glass. Tessa filed for full custody, arguing that Abby was unsafe with us. The courtroom was one of those old ones with creaky pews and carved lions. Tessa arrived with a folder of printouts, my Instagram, Eric's bank statements, a blurry photo of Abby at our kitchen table doing wine homework. The glass was sparkling grape. Their lawyer called Abby impressionable. I wanted to sink through the floor. Then the judge asked if Abby wished to speak. Tessa squeezed her hand, ready to guide the script. Abby squared her shoulders. "Yes, Your Honor." She pulled out a composition notebook. "This is a log I kept since February. Each page had dates and quotes. Not ours, Tessa's. Mom told me Dad doesn't love me because he has a new family. Mom said to cry in front of the judge. Mom told me to tell the therapist I'm scared at Dad's." Eric stared at his shoes. I stared at the lions. Tessa went paper white. Abby turned to the bailiff. "Also, I brought my phone." She scrolled to voice memos. I didn't want to be believed just because I'm a kid, so I recorded. We listened to Tessa coaching her on answers, prompting tears, dangling a promised puppy if she held strong. Our lawyer didn't have to say much. The judge did. He talked about emotional abuse in a voice so gentle it felt like a blanket. He said the words, primary custody with father. Tessa sputtered about context and betrayal. The judge leaned forward. Mrs. Cole, the betrayal happened when you asked your child to lie. Abby took my hand in the hallway, fingers trembling. Can we go home? She asked, and then, quieter, to your home? I braced for the dagger look from Tessa rounding the corner, but Abby didn't flinch. I packed last night, she whispered. It's in my band locker. On the drive to the school, she asked if we could stop for great soda. She broke the seal, took a dramatic sip, and grinned. Cheers, she said, tapping the bottle to mine, to finally not having to pretend. When we opened her locker, a small, smushed plush puppy fell out. Abby laughed, then cried, then said, I brought my own.
Story 3. Our HOA president, Carl, patrolled like a mall cop who'd confiscate clouds if he could. He once fined Mrs. Wynn for decoration pollution because her wind chime had a dolphin. Packages went missing, fines spiked, and any request for receipts got buried under a special privilege clause he invented. The neighborhood's battleground was the Facebook group. Carl posted daily, blurry photos of recycling bins, too forward, threats to escalate. People joked about electing a raccoon instead. Then, Mrs. Rivera, whose husband's Bronze Star vanished from a delivered box, asked again for a security camera fund. Carl called it frivolous. Enter Maya, a college sophomore home for the summer who babysat half our cul-de-sac. She DM'd me. Does Carl have a TikTok? I didn't know. She sent a link. There he was, username @FlipKingCarl, face partially cropped, showing unclaimed freight hauls, Sephora kits, electronics, collectible coins, even a shadow box that looked unsettlingly like a military medal. In the comments, where do you source? He replied with a winky face and a box emoji. Maya stitched his video with clips from our group, the exact missing items. The algorithm did the rest. Within hours, the neighborhood chat lit up like a Christmas crime scene. Carl posted that it was defamation and deep fakes. 2 people unsubscribed from HOA autopay in the comments. At the annual block party, hot dogs, folding tables, kids spraying each other with those cursed sticky hands, Carl grabbed the bullhorn to restore order. That's when Officer Ramirez walked up, flanked by 2 others. She asked to speak with him privately. Carl laughed too loud. Am I being detained for grilling without a permit? No, she said, calm as water, for possession of stolen property. She turned to Mrs. Rivera. Is this yours? Ramirez held up the Bronze Star shadow box, felt pen letters still on the bubble wrap. Rivera. Mrs. Rivera covered her mouth and nodded. Someone started clapping. It spread. The police searched Carl's garage. Boxes, 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 and in the corner, the HOA archive, which turned out to be a shoebox of crumpled receipts from Security Consulting, $7,500, all paid to Carl. The treasurer resigned on the spot. We voted to remove Carl, with the bullhorn still dangling from his wrist. A week later, Maya knocked on Mrs. Rivera's door with a cardboard rectangle. She'd printed the frame of Carl's video, where he bragged, frozen mid-smirk. Under it, in vinyl letters, she'd stuck the group's new motto, Cameras are frivolous. Carl, 2025. Mrs. Rivera hung it under the reinstated Bronze Star and laughed until she cried. The board appointed Maya to lead the real security fund. First purchase? A camera pointed to the community mailbox. Second, a little plaque, donated in honor of our biggest contributor, @FlipKingCarl.
Story 4. Our HOA president, Glenn, was the kind of man who measured your grass with a ruler but let his own porch light go out for months. He ticketed a 12-year-old for chalk drawings, defacement, shut down my kid's lemonade stand, unlicensed beverage distribution, and wrote a newsletter column about returning the neighborhood to standards that read like he had a love affair with clipboards. For the summer block party, he demanded we move it to the cul-de-sac to preserve emergency vehicle access. We'd always had it there. Fine. He strutted around with a sash. Yes, a sash labeled Event Supervisor and a lanyard with a walkie-talkie nobody else had. At noon, a white city truck rolled up. Glenn puffed, ready to show he'd secured permits. The woman who stepped out wore a county badge. She looked at the bounce house, the grills, the lemonade stand, permitted this time, laminated, and then at the brand new stone gate Glenn had installed at the subdivision entrance to increase property values. It had neat uplighting, a tasteful plaque with the HOA name, and, as it turned out, 0 permits. She unfolded a clipboard. "We've received multiple complaints about unpermitted structures," she said. Glenn smirked at me. "We're very compliant," he said, tugging his sash like a general's appellate. "Great," she said. "Show me the permit for the gate, the electrical for the uplighting, and the drainage plan for the widened median." He blinked. "It's decorative," he said. "We voted on it." She nodded. "The city didn't?" He tried to pivot. "This is harassment from a few disgruntled residents who don't like order." Her partner shook his head. "Sir, your email in the work order actually flags your own address as the billing contact for the contractor. The city can't invoice the HOA for a private improvement." Glenn began to sweat. The official turned to the crowd. "We'll have to power down the uplighting and find the responsible party. Also, the median violates sightline codes. It'll have to come out." Groans. Glenn waved his hands. "We'll appeal," he said. The official smiled the way you smile at someone about to sit in a chair that isn't there. "You can. But just so you know, the complainant was an anonymous neighbor at first. Then they identified themselves. It expedited the case." She checked her sheet. "Mrs. Glenn" had snapped. Glenn's wife raised her hand. "I asked him to stop. He used HOA funds without a vote, and he kept the contractor invoices in his truck. I found them when I borrowed it." I took a breath that sounded like the first one she'd had in years. "I'm done paying fines for his hobbies." He sputtered, tried to scold her for embarrassing him, for airing family business. A kid behind me whispered, "Karma's got a sash too." The official cut the power. The lights flicked off like a curtain call. By sunset, we'd moved the party to the park like we should have done all along. The lemonade stand sold out, and as the tow truck hooked onto the illegal stone Glenn had anchored himself to like a personality trait, his walkie crackled one last time. "Unit 1 to anyone? Anyone?" Static answered. For once, no one was listening.
Story 5. I spent 6 years at a boutique architecture firm run by a man named Niles who collected NDAs like trophies. He'd rewrite your credits, bill your nights as team spirit, and tell clients their delays were our fault. We called it Niles Math. When he fired Priya, our best project manager, for incompetence right after she announced her pregnancy, we pooled money for her baby shower and rage ate cake. She sued. Niles smirked through the first conference saying it was frivolous. Mediation dragged, then depositions. His lawyer wagged a finger at me and asked if Priya had ever missed a deadline. "No," I said. She hit deadlines Niles forgot existed. Everyone knew the truth, proving it was the mountain. Then the twist walked in wearing scuffed sneakers and a messenger bag. Gordon, our former IT guy who left 2 years prior for a government job, he'd been subpoenaed over a backup server he installed under Niles' radar. The Ark, he called it. Niles laughed. "An Ark for what, exactly?" Gordon shrugged. "Your emails, your time tracking, the edits to the employee handbook you pushed at 11:52 p.m. the night before you fired Priya." Niles blanched. His favorite trick had been retroactively changing policies. The Ark had version history.
It showed a clause, extended probation period for new parents, inserted post hoc. It showed Niles instructing HR, make sure the performance memo predates the OB appointment. And, because hubris never travels alone, it had voice memos from Niles' phone synced to the server. Him dictating billing optimizations, including double billing Priya's time to a client who'd paid in full. He tried to settle in the hallway for a number he thought would bruise and heal. Priya's lawyer smiled like a cat in sunlight. The mediator returned with a figure twice that and non-disparagement terms Niles thought he could weaponize. Priya said, I'll agree if I can name the scholarship. He frowned. What scholarship? She looked around the conference room at the junior women clutching notepads like shields. The one I'm starting with the money. For licensing fees and exams for women in our field so they never have to ask you for anything. Niles scoffed. You can't talk about me, she said. I don't need to. The scholarship will do the talking. 2 months later, at the state AIA banquet, they announced the Prioral Fellowship. The stage lights were unforgiving. Niles sat 3 rows back, clapping because not clapping would be louder. The MC thanked a generous anonymous donor. We all knew. When Priya took the podium, she looked straight past him. She said, to the person who taught me how to document everything, I finally get to say, thank you. She held up a hard drive on a keychain. Laughter rippled through the room. It wasn't the money that undid him. It was the realization that his legacy wouldn't be the buildings he stamped, but the receipts we kept.
Story 6. My grandfather's wake was the kind where casseroles reproduce on the dining table if you look away. Uncle Dean, golden child since 1978, ran the room like a campaign stop, shaking hands, promising to take care of Mom now. He'd moved Grandpa into a boutique nursing home last year and sold Grandpa's truck for convenience. My mother, Dean's not golden sister, stacked paper plates like she'd rather snap them in half. After the eulogies, the estate lawyer, Ms. Halpern, cleared her throat and asked if the immediate family could assemble in the den. We shuffled in with our grief and potato salad. The lawyer set her laptop on the old walnut desk and clicked a file labeled, Read Me if Dean shows up. People laughed, then stopped when Grandpa's face filled the TV, recorded a month before he died, wearing his fishing hat, eyes as sharp as ever. He didn't talk about love or legacy, he talked about math. Numbers marched across the screen, withdrawals, cashier's checks, the exact day Dean got added for convenience to the checking account. Grandpa read off amounts like lotto numbers. If you're watching this, he said, I'm either gone or tired of being polite. Dean blustered. Dad, come on, we talked about those. Grandpa smiled the dry smile he used on telemarketers. Dean, I told you I was hard of hearing, not stupid. He gestured off camera. Nora, show him. The screen cut to a spreadsheet and then to a photo of a cardboard banker's box with bank logos on the side. This sits in the attic of a shed. If it's gone, the police already have copies. Dean went white, then red. Miss Halpern slid an envelope to him. Inside was a single-dollar bill and a receipt photocopy, a cashier's check to a lifestyle coach for $9,500. To my son, Grandpa's voice continued, I leave the amount you thought I could live on, $1, and a receipt so you remember what stealing looks like. Silence hummed like a power line. To my mom, the house, paid in full. To the nurse who brought Grandpa contraband root beer and changed his TV remote batteries, my fishing boat, and the savings I told everyone I didn't have. To the VFW, the truck you told me was totaled, Dean. It's in Nate's barn under a tarp. Keys are taped under the workbench. Dean lunged for the laptop. My cousin Jake, who wrestles college heavyweights, didn't move, just rearranged his shoulders in Dean's path. The doorbell rang. 2 officers stood on the porch, hats in hand. We got a call from a Mr. Halpern, one said, mispronouncing like everyone does, about suspected elder financial abuse and a box of records. They didn't cuff Dean. They didn't have to. When they asked for the boutique home's billing contact, Mom handed them Dean's business card from his consulting LLC. He started to stammer that we were making a mistake, that Dad would never. Grandpa's video cut back in, eyes softening. Dean, if you're still in the room, I hope you learned something from this. If not, well, Nora, make sure someone takes my old cane. It's good hickory. My mom reached for the cane, leaning by the desk like an exclamation point. She didn't cry. She laughed, short and bright. I'll take it, she said. And the house.
Story 7. I was second author on a paper that made my mom call me doctor at Thanksgiving, even though I'm just a grad student with 3 plants I routinely forget to water. Our PI, Dr. Mercer, was famous. TED Talk, glossy magazine profile, a knack for telling stories with data like he'd been born under a spotlight. He also had a habit of polishing figures until they glowed. The big reveal was scheduled for an international symposium. Mercer insisted on presenting his findings, a protein pathway we'd spent 2 years elbow-deep in mice to map. He took my slides, my notes, and my sleep. I told myself it was science. Science is teamwork, credit is messy. The ballroom was a chandelier parade. Mercer sauntered up, laser pointer twinkling like a wand. He clicked to the figure that had cost me my weekends, a Western blot with bands stacked like a barcode. He said, and as you can see, when a soft murmur rippled, then a hushed, oh. On the screen, faintly, in the corner where no one ever looks, a watermark crawled into view as he zoomed in. V3, draft, M. Patel. My name, the version number, the timestamp. He told me to send him the clean PSDs. I'd sent flattened PNGs with invisible 1% opacity labels tucked into the shadows because I had a feeling. Not to catch him, just to keep my own head straight about what belonged to whom. Mercer kept talking. The watermark became clearer with each dramatic zoom. A woman in the front row raised her hand. Dr. Mercer, could you clarify who M. Patel is? It appears on your figures. My heartbeat became percussion. He chuckled. One of my talented staff. The woman didn't sit. I'm the editor of Molecular Cell. Your last revision stripped 3 authors. Was Miss Patel one? Microphones sprouted like mushrooms as other hands went up. 2 postdocs from other labs DM'd me mid-talk. Your figure is on the screen. Do you want backup? Mercer's smile went brittle. He tried to move on. Our department chair was standing at the back, arms folded, expression like a winter window. The AV tech, bless chaotic energy, froze the frame and zoomed further. Now 3 watermarks blinked from different corners. The entire deck I'd built carried them. Mercer's voice wavered. Clearly, there's been a formatting error. I walked to the aisle before my courage changed its mind. I'm M. Patel, I said, voice thin but audible. I drafted those figures. Dr. Mercer removed my authorship 2 days ago and told me to be a team player. I handed the chair a zipped folder on a flash drive, raw data, lab notebook scans, every version trail. If the work is sound, the name should be too. The room didn't cheer. It did something harder. It went quiet in that way people get quiet when they're deciding to believe the person with the least power. The chair nodded once, like he'd been waiting. We'll pause this session. Ms. Patel, please join me backstage. Dr. Mercer as well. Mercer tried to speak. The mic cut. AV tech again, accidental hero. Behind the curtain, the chair asked for my files. I handed over months of stupidly diligent backups. My mom taught me to keep receipts. And then I immediately thought about how literal that sounded. The next morning, the Keynote app pinged. Keynote updated. Data integrity panel with early career scientists. Mercer's slot was gone. In its place, 3 of us shared how we do science without losing ourselves. My mom watched the live stream from her couch, texted, Dr. Mom is crying. Later, the department sent an email with words like investigation, authorship correction, and leave of absence. The twist didn't feel like a victory lap. It felt like air. In the Q&A, that editor approached the mic. Miss Patel, your watermarks were elegant. I shrugged. My plants have died for less, I said, and everyone laughed. And I got to say it out loud in a room full of people who finally looked me in the eye. It's our work.
Story 8. I'm a city inspector, which means my inbox is mostly photos of mushrooms growing out of baseboards.
December was a cold slap that year. Complaints from the same building kept stacking. No heat, broken windows, smoke alarms that chirped like sad birds. The landlord, a guy named Boris with a chain of LLCs, loved to tell the press he provided affordable housing out of a sense of civic duty. He wore news anchors like accessories. City Council scheduled a hearing on housing safety. Boris showed up with a scarf the price of a used Honda and a publicist. Tenants showed up in coats over coats, babies bundled like laundry. He gave an opening statement about complexities of legacy infrastructure, which is landlord for, I don't feel like buying a new boiler. Then the public comment period began. An older tenant, Miss Delgado, set her phone on the podium. I don't speak fancy, she said, so I'll let the phone talk. She hit play. A baby cried in the background. The high, relentless beep of a carbon monoxide alarm filled the chamber. I called your office 4 times, she said, looking at me, not unkindly. I knew the timestamps. We'd been trying to get warrants while our breath made fog in our masks in those hallways. Boris rolled his eyes. This is theater. From the back, a woman in a county jacket stood up. I'm with CPS, she said quietly. We placed Miss Delgado's grandkids with a neighbor for 2 nights last month because of that alarm. You could feel the room stiffen like ice. Council members shuffled papers that had suddenly become interesting. I asked to play a recording. My partner had found a podcast Boris did last spring, all about disrupting regulation. On it, Boris laughed about strategic compliance, fixing one broken thing enough to pass reinspection. We let it run until he joked about creative thermostat placement to trick inspectors. The council chair raised an eyebrow. Creative? I pulled out photos from last week's visit, a thermostat installed on an interior closet wall over a space heater, the only warm spot in a freezing apartment. Boris's lawyer objected. The chair banged the gavel. Objection noted and ignored. Then a woman I didn't recognize stepped up. I'm here as a daughter, she said. My dad is Boris. The room made the sound a room makes when it realizes the floor just dropped an inch. She held up a folder of emails, her work, not ours. I begged him to fix that building. He told me we couldn't invest there because the return was better if tenants left and we could gut renovate. I'm a social worker. I can't keep sending kids back into your gray zones, Dad. Boris turned a color I hadn't seen before. Nadia, don't, she said. Not here. The chair took a breath like a promise. Effective immediately, the city is revoking your rental licenses pending emergency repairs and appointing a receiver. He nodded to me. Inspector, you'll coordinate. Boris, if you operate a space heater within 10 feet of a thermostat again, I will personally learn where you live and camp on your stoop. People didn't clap. They exhaled. Outside in the cold, so clean it hurt, Miss Delgado pressed a paper cup of café con leche into my hands. For the walking you're about to do, she said. Nadia stood by the steps alone, hugging her elbows. I offered a nod I hoped said what words couldn't. She nodded back, eyes red but steady. He always said he built things. I hope this time we built something that matters.
Story 9. I started dating Eli, a drummer who can make a room breathe with his snare. He plays in a band that used to be a couple minus one. Eli and his ex, Noor, wrote together in a shoebox apartment until she left, him and the lease. She stayed friendly on the internet, which is to say she subtweeted him for a year. When the band landed a live radio spot to debut their new single, Noor posted a thread. Wild to hear my melody in someone else's mouth. She hinted that Eli stole her hook and scrubbed her name. People love a theft narrative, especially if there's an ex dependent on. The radio host loved drama. Halfway through the set, she says, "We have a caller. It's Noor. I just want to congratulate the band on the success of the song I wrote in 2021, she purrs. The studio tightens. Eli looks at me through glass. I feel that centrifugal pull of public shaming. Eli swallows. Noor, you wrote a lot with me, he says, but this song came from a voice memo I recorded in 2017 after my dad's stroke. You were there when I played it. The host raises her eyebrows. Any proof? She pounces. Eli nods towards the producer, who's already Googling. There's a Dropbox, he says. It's time-stamped. I shared it with the band back then, and... He stops.
His face changes the way light changes a lake. The producer has found the folder. Inside is the 2017 memo, Eli humming the chorus into a phone that still burned with grief. Under it, a 2021 shared link from Nora's account titled Alt Bridge, Keep, with comment history where she suggests moving the chorus up like your old memo. The host leans into the mic. Nor, are you on the line? Silence. Then a click. We go to commercial. In the break, the station manager, who looks like he eats contracts for breakfast, walks in with his legal pad. He says, "We're not getting sued over this," and calls in their archivist. Yes, they have one. She pulls up their own submission portal logs. Last year, Nor had uploaded a solo demo that used Eli's 2017 melody wholesale tagged as original. The system tagged it as similar to a file uploaded years prior by Eli when he'd sent in his early bedroom recordings for a showcase and gotten the gentlest rejection of his life. The station owned the metadata. The timestamps were a guillotine. We go back on air. The host, chastened, lets the band play. Eli closes his eyes and sings like someone walking out of a courthouse into winter sunlight. The comments under the live stream pivot. A music lawyer messages the band, offering to tidy splits. That 2021 bridge was Nora's idea, and Eli insists she keep a percentage for that. He says it into the mic. She shaped the middle eight. Credit matters. The host nods small. The twist? A week later, Nora posts an apology that isn't. I felt stolen from because I was grieving the life I thought I'd have, but the melody was his first. Then, at the bottom, she reveals she's been diagnosed with Meniere's disease, her hearing fading in one ear. She'd been lashing out at the last thing she could still hear clearly, their past. Eli reads it and goes quiet for a long time. He adds her name to the liner notes, not out of fear, but respect for the piece of the song that is undeniably hers. The worst karma for Nor wasn't the legal slap, it was realizing the louder she shouted, the less she could actually hear. For Eli, the justice wasn't vindication, it was getting his father's hum back, on record, under the right name.
Story 10. My Nona fell in love with a radio. That's what we said, anyway. She'd call in to Father Michael's Hour of Comfort every Wednesday, voice trembling, and he'd pray for her arthritis, and the garden, and the anniversary of my grandfather's death. Then she started mailing checks to his charity, Lighted Path Ministries. Small ones at first, $20, then $50. By summer, she'd sold her sapphire ring to help flood victims. The flood had happened 3 years ago. I'm an IT guy who spends his life telling people not to click things. I sat with Nona at her kitchen table and tried to show her how scams work. "She knows my name," she said, patting my hand. "He remembers your birthday." I didn't tell her that birthdays leave trails online. Instead, I tuned in. Father Michael wasn't a priest. He never claimed ordination, just allowed the title to stick like burrs. He had a velvet voice and a website with stock photos of hands holding candles. I dug. The ministry was a P.O. box and a shell corp, rerouting donations through a payment processor used by a dozen other causes, registered to a single condo in Miami. I filed complaints that disappeared into automated replies. He kept asking for love offerings. So I built my own honeypot, a donation from Mr. Salvatore Rossi, a name invented from my dad's middle name and my dog's vet. I created an email with enough breadcrumbs to smell like an old man with savings. Within a week, Father Michael left a voicemail. He sounded like a lullaby. He asked Mr. Rossi to consider a legacy gift. I recorded everything. Then I did something that felt both petty and holy. I bought a sponsorship slot on his show. 10 seconds before he went on air, the station ran my ad. This segment is brought to you by Tri-County Elder Justice, reminding you to verify charities at the state registry. It linked to a site my friend at the AG's office had built. On it sat a big red banner, Lighted Path Ministries, under investigation.
He kept broadcasting. Donations dipped. Nona cried when I told her not to send more. "She prays for me," she said. "Who will pray for me if I don't help?" 2 months later, I got the call. The state AG had a task force, and my files were the missing thread between a dozen complaints and something chargeable. They wanted me to come to the station with an investigator. We waited in a lobby that smelled like burned coffee and donations. Father Michael breezed in carrying a leather satchel. The investigator introduced herself. He smiled. "Always happy to help the state." In the studio, while they tested levels, the engineer, who'd clearly had enough of Velvet, switched the feed to the lobby camera and piped the audio over the live stream. The audience heard everything. The investigator reading out bank accounts, the mismatch between the charity and his condo, his side businesses selling miracle candles. He kept smiling until she said, "We've obtained a court order freezing your accounts." His face changed shape. He reached for the mic like it might save him. "Listen, dear listeners." The engineer killed the mic. Silence. Then, my Nona's voice, calling the station, having been put through by a receptionist with a spine of steel. "Father?" she asked, on air. "I hope they take your voice and give it to someone who means it." He was indicted. The station issued a groveling apology and a programming pivot to local news and classic rock. Nona still sits at her kitchen table Wednesday nights. I come over with cannoli. We light a candle and say our own prayer out loud. No velvet, no P.O. box. She keeps her sapphire's empty setting on her finger, a tiny silver frame around a lesson I wish she hadn't had to buy. When we're done, she always says the same thing like a closing hymn. He finally got what he asked for, attention from the right people.
Story 11. I was the dishwasher at La Serena, the kind of place with a chalkboard menu and a chef's kiss emoji stenciled on the bathroom mirror. The owner, Brent, wore linen shirts and rescued wine from his buddy's distributor. He also rescued our wages, shaving hours, making us clock out before the rush to help keep the dream alive. He called me brother a lot. He called our line cook Rosa kid, even though she had 2 kids of her own. Rosa kept a notebook in her apron, start times, end times, cash tips Brent scooped for the tip pool, which was a mason jar that only seemed to flow one way. When she asked about overtime, he told her, smiling, that in hospitality we jazz, we don't count. He loved to say we're a family the way people do when they want free labor. One night a TV crew came to film a hidden gems segment, 5 minutes of B-roll to sell reservations. Brent polished his story, immigrant dream, local sourcing, deep respect for staff. He handed out branded hats, told us not to swear, and made us repeat lines about craft and passion. The producer fitted everyone with tiny wireless mics to catch kitchen ambiance. Brent forgot his was still on. During staff meal, he leaned on the expo window and did the math out loud. If we cut 5 hours from everyone this week, I can show profitability for the line of credit. He told the hostess to split tips with the bar, but route the cash to me so I can distribute it, which meant he'd pocket the big nights and Venmo us guilt later. He told Rosa, who just burned her forearm, to clock out until the dinner wave. You're eating, you're not working. The producer's face changed shades I didn't know existed. They kept filming. A week later, the segment dropped. It started like fluff, slow pans over parsley, Brent talking about community. Then, mid-pan-seared scallop, the audio cut to his own voice, clear as a bell, explaining the wage shaving like a cooking technique. Subtitles, a timestamp. The show had turned into a PSA about wage theft. They'd consulted the Department of Labor on screen. This practice is illegal. Here's how to report it, a caption read. The comments exploded. Regulars canceled the reservations with essays. A labor attorney DM'd Rosa and 3 of us with, "I'll take this contingency." The state showed up 2 days later with clipboards and a charm offensive that didn't need charms. Brent shut the doors temporarily, funded his legal defense, and then 3 months later failed to make rent. The bank auctioned the fixtures, a local nonprofit that incubates worker co-ops put in a bid. Rosa cried in the empty dining room, then wiped her cheeks and signed papers with hands that smelled like garlic forever. When we reopened, the chalkboard had a new special.
jazz hands, actual breaks, actual overtime. We split tips on a spreadsheet you could see from any station. On our first night as a co-op, a couple asked to meet the owner. Rosa stepped out in her apron and held up the little stock certificate we'd each gotten, creased from her pocket. There are 7 of us, and yes, we count.
Story 12. I'm a reference librarian who likes rules because they make kindness easier to scale. Our university's rare books room is a vault, a cold, quiet chapel for things with spines older than our country. Donors come to preen. One in particular, Victor Pembroke, loved to be photographed almost as much as he loved Latin phrases. He'd pledged a wing and insisted on a gala, strings, champagne, the whole costume. 2 months before the gala, a student came crying to my desk. Her thesis hinged on a 17th century herbal. The call slip came back, item missing. The shelf space felt like a pulled tooth. We checked logs. The last reader was Private Viewing, Pembroke. Missing, too, were 3 pamphlets and a vellum map. Our curator sent polite inquiries. Victor sent a photo from Tuscany with a wine glass the size of a bowling trophy. Regrettably cannot assist, he typed. The night of the gala, he worked the room like an auctioneer. He joked that we should relax the white glove thing. He posed in front of the math case, empty now, turned into a display about conservation ethics that made him chuckle. So dramatic, he murmured. My partner, who is a meme goblin, had been doom-scrolling Victor's Instagram for days. She nudged me and held up her phone. In a selfie from his study, alongside the watch and the decanter, you could see, reflected in the glass of a framed photo on the credenza, the edge of a vellum map, its distinctive tear like a birthmark. He'd posted his own mirror evidence. We didn't burst into a CSI sprint. We called campus police and, more importantly, the State Antiquities Task Force, who descended in sensible shoes. They didn't arrest him at the gala. They served a warrant at his home at 8 a.m. the next morning when he was in slippers, the hour when vanity is least useful. His house was a museum of our missing. The herbal sat on a side table under a mug, the pamphlets fanned like coasters, the map pinned behind his desk with push pins. Push pins! He pretended to be shocked. He said, "These were gifts." "From whom?" an agent asked. He gestured vaguely. "The library appreciates my support." At the emergency board meeting, Victor called it a misunderstanding. Our director slid a folder across the table. Inside were his signed reader logs, the camera stills — we don't film readers' faces, only desks — and his own Instagram printouts with the little visible accession numbers our cataloger writes in the margin in pencil. Tiny as breath, visible if you know to look. "He tagged himself," she said. "We're just following the tags." They removed his name from the wing with a slow, careful peel that took an afternoon and then painted the wall the palest gray so the shadow of the letters wouldn't show. He got indicted for theft of cultural property, which turns the word donor into something else. At the staff potluck, I tucked the herbal back into its acid-free cradle. The student came by with a plate of brownies and eyes red from a mixture of rage and relief. "I wrote the acknowledgments," she said, voice wobbling. "I thanked the rare books room by name." I closed the lid and looked at the blank space where his plaque had been. "We'll make sure it stays our name," I said. And then I checked the locks again for the pleasure of hearing them click.
Story 13. I mod a mid-sized MMO guild because I like spreadsheets and the illusion of control. Our leader, Cade, had charisma you could bottle and sell in loot crates. He ran charity streams, talked about community, and somehow always wound up with the rarest mounts. We'd built our name on a promise. Donations during events go straight to the charity, drops get rolled, no exceptions. During our marathon stream for a disaster relief fund, the chat window flew like confetti. Cade wore a headset crown, cracking jokes as the donation ticker climbed. But PayPal started flagging weird things. Massive donations that appeared, spiked the counter, then refunded an hour later. The charity's live dashboard, which they'd helpfully shared a private link to so we could cheer milestones, didn't match our total. We shrugged. Payment processors lag. Then a kid in chat asked an innocent question. "Why does the donate button link to /give? My mom says official pages use /donate. A mod clicked. The URL Cade put in the stream overlay ended in his username with a routing parameter I didn't recognize.
He'd set up a pass-through, a pretty landing page that forwarded some donations to the charity and some to his personal account, depending on the amount and timing. Smaller gifts went through. Big ones came to him. I DM'd him. "Link's wrong," he replied, "on it," and updated the overlay midstream. The total dropped by $4,000. He pivoted to a boss fight, flooding the screen with particle effects. Our treasurer pinged me. Do I stop the stream? I watched Cade's cam. He had the grin of a man who's never been caught, only interrupted. Then the charity's social media manager messaged our Discord. "Hey, we're about to shout you out. Also, please use this official Tiltify link." I said, "Wait." I sent her screenshots and the routing code. She went quiet. 2 minutes later, her verified account posted a thread, tactful, careful not naming names, about best practices for creators and unaltered links. The replies pointed at us anyway. Cade tried to spin. He said, "We had a technical glitch," he said on stream, performatively wrecked. The chat split like cells, half believers, half detectives. Our quietest member, Jen, who never spoke in voice chat and had the boring job of checking raid attendance, dropped in with, "The glitch dates back to last year's stream. Here are the archive overlays." She'd saved everything. The pass-through code was there, every time. The charity emailed us a ledger. We were short by 5 figures. Cade's cam froze. He came back with puffy eyes and a prepared statement that sounded like bad improv. We cut the feed and posted an apology with receipts and a new link. The platform banned him within the hour. The charity announced that a donor, anonymous, had covered the gap. An hour later, Jen posted in our officers' channel. "It was me. I had the savings. Please don't make a fuss." We didn't. We renamed the guild after the relief fund for a month. Cade tried to resurface under a new handle. People recognized his voice. The twist that didn't make the internet. 2 weeks later, a box showed up at my door with a handwritten note. "I'm sorry. I can't fix it, but I can return it." Inside were 3 of the rarest mounts redemption codes. I redeemed one and set the other 2 aside. At the next stream, transparent link, public totals, we raffled them for the charity. We didn't say where they came from. Some receipts don't need to be framed to be true.